Hello and welcome back to another lore reading with me, Meoni, for Final Fantasy XIV. I'm sat here with the Encyclopedia Eorzea, as usual, and we're continuing where we left off in the previous episode of the lore video series on the Age of Enlightenment. This is on the section of basically the history of Eorzea. We're quite a ways into this. If you want to see the start of this, go back a few videos. I will have a link to a playlist in the description for you as well. So let's kick this off then with more talk about the ancient city of Amdapor. At the dawn of the 5th Astral Era, a group of Hyur arrived in what is now the South Shroud. The area in which they settled was an open plain, interspersed with massive outcrops of light-coloured rock, distinctly bereft of the thick forest cover now associated with the region. The abundance of stone allowed the Hyur to erect exceptionally sturdy structures, and by the year 300, central Aldenard had transformed into the bustling city of Amdapor. The people of Amdapor attempted to commune with the enigmatic elementals of the Black Shroud, that they might partake in the bounty of the forest. The elementals, ever untrusting of men, declined any interaction with their new neighbours, content with the distance between them. The Amdapori respected this wish and did not forcibly encroach upon their sacred holt, save for the occasional pursuit of quarry during a hunt. It is worth mentioning, however, that the elementals did not entirely shun outsiders during this period. Amicable relations were maintained with the Ixali tribes, the elementals allowing them ingress into the shroud upon deeming the beastmen no threat to the forest's natural balance. As their city-state prospered, the Amdapori focused on fortifying their domain, expanding their defences by constructing an enormous stronghold atop a knoll outside the city proper. Paying reverence to Nofika, the goddess of abundance, they claimed to cherish harmony with nature and promised their neighbours a peaceful coexistence. The societies in the surrounding vicinity benefited from this philosophy, and Amdapor was viewed not as a threat, but a respected elder watching over its 11 fellow cities. Thus did it come to be known as the Ancient City. And there's a small section here with an image I'll upload for you. Much of what remains of the city of Amdapor is slowly being swallowed by an ever-thickening blanket of mould caused by an elemental imbalance lingering in the aftermath of the 7th Umbral Calamity. Even so, archaeologists expect the delay will do little to destroy the ancient city's stone foundations, architectural feats which have already withstood more than a millennium and a half of nature's wrath. Next we look at the discovery of white magic. The Amdapori initially harnessed basic magics for use in their city's defences, drawing and expanding upon the primitive knowledge of golem creation to temporarily imbue stone statues with life. However, in the 9th century, mages of the ancient city bore witness to Mark's use of the destructive arts to subjugate neighbouring city-states. Wary of their neighbours' ambitions, the Amdapori sought to counter these black magics by improving upon their own spellcraft, weaving with the intent to purify, ward, and heal the art of white magic. It had been argued that without the discovery of white magic, Amdapor would have likely have succumbed to Mark's ambitions. That the ancient city had developed a means to keep the black mages in check prevented the Marquis army from waging a full-fledged assault on Amdapor, lest they, too, suffer grievous losses. Thus, for the next few centuries, did Eorzea experience a fragile, yet lasting peace, fostered by the precarious balance between the two nations and their opposing schools of magic. A couple of small things here. There's a little demon wall that says, despite their sinister visage, demon walls are not void-sent, but forgekin created using a primal form of Amdapori white magic. By inscribing a stone wall with an arcane pattern of blood, these golems would spring to life to intimidate and repel trespassers. And the other image here is of this big lion. It says, carved during the 5th Astral Era, this winged lion is the ensorcelled stone guardian, capable of manipulating white magic at its own will a testament to the advancement of Amdapor's arcane capabilities. Very cool indeed. So next we look at War on the Horizon. The people of Eorzea flourished in the peace brought about by the impasse between the black and white schools of sorcery. Following in the footsteps of Mark and Amdapor, other city-states began developing their own forms of spellcraft in attempts to further their societies. This approach to the achievement of prosperity was vastly different than what was taken by the Allagans of a third astral era, eschewing technological growth for advancement of a more arcane nature. However, progress would come with a hefty price, as man would soon become drunk on the might that arcane puissance would bring him. Societies built upon foundations of magic were forced to sacrifice their natural surroundings, as vast amounts of ether were drawn from the land in order to maintain the city's magnificence. The realm's enlightenment had become a double-edged sword. Each mage city maintained the facade of an edifying heritage, while secretly honing their offensive magics. One need not be an oracle to see that the interlude of peace would soon draw to an end. The mages of Mark silently turned their eyes to the dark, seeking to slake their expansionist ambitions by amassing an army of void-sent thralls. Amdapor kept their outward appearance as a rich bastion of arts and culture, but daunting sculptures of its guardians soon appeared in every corner of the city. While the actual catalyst for war remains lost to time, it is known that the frequency of political and military posturing between the two nations increased in dramatic fashion as the realm approached the mid-13th century, and ere long the entirety of Eorzea became entangled in an inescapable web of strife. The War of the Magi had begun. Got this really cool little bit here on the Wanderer's Palace. I'll upload a picture of this as well. The Wanderer's Palace was a massive stone temple dedicated to the Nymians, patron god Oshon, ruler of the mountains and protector of the vagrants. It appears to be a coincidence that Vilbrand's indigenous kobold tribes also worshipped the mountains, referring Mount Ogomero as the sacred mother, but this commonality is believed to be why the Nymians were able to foster amicable relations with the beastmen. So now we have the section on the floating city of Nym. Near the 500th year of the 5th astral era, scores of Lalafellan sailors arrived on Vilbrand's shores in longboats woven of reeds. Here, the mercantilists built a meagre settlement on the southern part of the isle, with hopes of establishing trade with the native kobold tribes. In time, their lonely outpost would grow into the maritime city of Nym. Nym's population was not as robust as the other 12 city-states, but what the Nymians lacked in ascendancy, they made up for in commerce. Making full use of their consummate skills in seafaring, Nym's sailors were a rough and rowdy lot, traits they used to their advantage in establishing the Royal Marines, a small yet fearsome naval force that was placed in charge of the city's defences. Translations of Nymian records depict the Marines as axe-wielding marauders who would fight alongside a handful of talented mages who provided healing and support by way of their own uniquely developed brand of spellcraft. Despite their humble ranks, the Marines' tact proved their greatest strength, a great portion of Nym's legacy, alluding to legends of their fierce marital prowess. Even during the Great War, the Royal Marines ensured that their small nation maintained its independence by valiantly repelling wave after wave of void sent by the Marquis across the Rothlite Sound. The War of the Magi raged for nigh on 3 centuries before Nym was stricken by a mysterious plague, severely crippling the city-state. One common theory used to explain how the scourge was spread involves a curious story concerning a band of Nymian sailors who had been cast adrift in the South Seas after their ship was battered by a fearsome storm. The disoriented seamen landed on a desert isle, where they met a native tribe of Lalafels, who nursed them back to health and mended their broken vessel so that they might return safely to Nym. Before the traders disembarked, the islanders bestowed upon them a parting gift, an ornate amphora. Not long after the sailors returned to the floating city and presented the token of friendship, Nym's people fell one by an incurable sickness, heretofore unseen on Vilbrand. It was not until it was too late that the Nymian scholars discovered the amphora to be part of an elaborate Magi plan that would see the unleashing of Bitoso, a pestilence-carrying void-scent summoned to Eorzea for the sole purpose of decimating the Nymian population. Those who contracted the void-scent's disease experienced disfiguring symptoms. Their nose and ears melted away, their limbs shriveled, and their flesh turned a ghastly shade of green. Attempts to contain the plague included isolation of the infected, who were locked away within the Wanderer's Palace, the sacred Nymian temple of Oshon. The Nymians remained wholly unaware of Bitoso's cloaked presence, and even as the temple's halls became filled with the sick and dying, the plague continued to spread. Panic over the Green Death eventually drove the city-state's mages to their wits' end, leaving them with no choice but to make drastic measures. In a last fit of desperation, the mages used their magics to swell the land's waters, sealing the Wanderer's Palace, as well as the fates of those trapped inside. Hysteria surrounding the plague would eventually consume the Nymians, leading their nation down the path of self-destruction. The Magi were ready to reap the seeds of destruction they had sown, and we have two other bits here of the actual Tonbries themselves. Many of those afflicted by the Nymian plague were roused from a deep slumber when the protective barrier that for centuries had isolated Wanderer's Palace from the outside world was shattered by the fallen shards of Dalamud. With no knowledge of the plague and its disfiguring effects on the skin and extremities, those early explorers of the recently surfaced temple claimed the ruins to be inhabited by Tonbries, mythical, rancorous creatures believed to stalk the shadows of night in search for revenge. And we also have another picture here of Bitoso himself. I'll make sure there's a picture there. Bitoso's ability to conceal his form left the Nymians guessing as to the actual cause of the plague, but was consuming the city from within. By the time they had uncovered the truth, it was too late to save those who had fallen, both to the scourge itself and at the hands of the mages who had sought to quell it. And there we go. That will be it for today, all about Amdapor. Very unfortunate, very sad part of a story, obviously. The War of the Magi pretty much consumed the entirety of Eorzea. And if you weren't aware of the Nymian plague before, well, perhaps that gives you a little bit more light on that. Next up, we are going to be looking in the next episode at the Battle of Amdapor. And basically, it reaches into the Void Ark and places like that. So we are not done in any way, shape, or form. It's a lot of fun reading these lore stories. Hopefully you're enjoying listening to them, and hopefully I'm doing some of them some justice. Again, some of the stuff in the background, the footage isn't going to be perfect. We only have access to what's in the game, so yeah, it's pretty limited in this one. Either way, thank you kindly for watching and listening wherever you are. Have a safe day, have a happy day, and I'll see you all next time.